Tonight, Trudeau shuffles his cabinet and splits off Northern Affairs from Indigenous Affairs.
And I'm standing on this ground that they forcibly removed my people from all those hundreds of years, and I'm still standing here.
We show you why the tiny house warriors are standing strong in resistance of the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
We create friendships, and we also learn other skills too.
And we take you to Gwich'in territory for the Great Northern Arts Festival. Good evening, I'm Melissa Ridgen.
And I'm Brittany Hobson. A rumor that Indigenous Crown Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett was being dropped from cabinet proved untrue today.
However, Northern Affairs will no longer be included in her title. APTN's Todd Lamrand has more on today's federal cabinet shuffle.
Dominic LeBlanc is now in charge of Northern Affairs, as well as internal trade and intergovernmental affairs. The North has been part of the Indigenous Department in its various names for over 50 years. National Chief Perry Bellegarde welcomed the change.
She's got to work with us on finding processes to move beyond the Indian Act. So she's got to work with us to move towards treaty implementation according to the spirit and intent. So she's got a lot of work. So I'd hope with this move that she's going to have more time and more energy to focus on that relationship, because it's really a fundamental relationship we have.
LeBlanc is no longer the Fisheries Minister. That now goes to North Vancouver MP Jonathan Wilkinson. The Conservative Party took partial credit for the change.
I think moving the Fisheries Ministry from the East Coast to the West Coast was done deliberately to avoid these kinds of issues that we were successfully bringing up.
For several days last May, the Conservatives questioned LeBlanc repeatedly. It was over how he awarded a quota to harvest Arctic surf clams to an Indigenous-led company. They alleged the company only existed on paper and complained about nepotism as it's led by a former Liberal MP.
At the end of the day, maybe an added benefit of putting Mr. LeBlanc into a different portfolio is that they don't have to deal with the Atlantic Canadian problems anymore, and that they can ignore them.
Amarjeet Sohi is now Natural Resources Minister. He takes over from Jim Carr, and he's now in charge of completing the controversial Kinder Morgan pipeline project.
This morning, the Prime Minister handed the responsibility of building the Trans Mountain Pipeline to the former Infrastructure Minister, who has been criticized for not being able to build any real infrastructure in over 2.5 years.
However, the Conservative Party did not say what they would do if the pipeline isn't started before the next election.
I certainly hope we don't get to that point, because we need to have this Trans Mountain Pipeline built, and that's what we're going to be holding this government and Minister Sohi to account on, getting it built, getting shovels in the ground and moving.
This shuffle did not include key departments such as finance, health, or justice. As well, Indigenous services will continue to be headed by Jane Philpott. Todd Lamrand, APTN National News, Ottawa.
For the second year in a row, 3 Indigenous leaders are not attending the annual Premier's meeting. Like last year, they say they want to participate as equal members and be recognized as representatives of governments. Angel Moore brings us more.
The Premier's meeting is being held at Algonquin Resort, St. Andrews, New Brunswick. But most notably absent are the Assembly of First Nations, the Inuit, Tapiri, Kanatami, and the Métis National Council. Perry Bellegarde, Nathan Obed, and Clement Chartier were invited to the Indigenous organizations meeting, but they have the same concerns as last year. They want to be acknowledged and treated as governments, not as organizations. Earlier today, the premiers met with 2 organizations that accepted the invitation, the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples and the Native Women's Association of Canada. National Chief Robert Bertrand of the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples said true reconciliation needs to have participation of all peoples, and he looks forward to building a relationship with the premiers to advance the rights of our people. Angel Moore, APTN National News, St. Andrews.
Manitoba chiefs are gathered at Broken Head First Nation south of Winnipeg. Candidates running for National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations will be taking their questions in a live forum. But they're also there to vote in a new regional chief to represent Manitoba at the AFN. Ashley Branson is there, and she joins us now. Thanks for joining us, Ashley. So what concerns are you hearing from the chiefs?
Well, there are two main concerns, and one being the healthcare, especially in remote communities across Manitoba, especially because people have to travel in and out of the community just to receive, proper medical care for their medications and to see their proper physician, and they're looking to ways to improve that. And another issue that has been brought up is the housing in many First Nation communities. A lot of them are vacant and run down, and chiefs are looking for ways to help rebuild the housing, and they're looking for ways to just improve the housing in general across Manitoba.
Chiefs are also there to pepper the candidates running for national chief. What can you tell us about that?
Well, 4 out of the 5 candidates are here. Perry Bellegarde, Sheila North, and Catherine Whitecloud, and Miles Richardson are in attendance. But Russ Diabo is actually on the West Coast right now, so he is unable to attend. But the crowd here is amazing. Like, there's 50 chiefs here, and out of 63 across Manitoba. And I've been talking to a few people here, and they say the turnout is amazing.
Okay, thanks for that. For our viewers, you can watch the AFN Candidates Forum live streaming on the APTN National News Facebook page or on our website at aptnnews.ca/livestream. Thank you for this, Ashley.
You're welcome.
Of course, we want to hear what you think. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptn news. You can also follow us APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Indigenous news. To BC now, where the Tiny House Warriors are showing their resistance to the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Last week, they occupied a provincial park, asserting Secwepemc rights to unceded land. The RCMP evicted them, but the Warriors say their fight is far from over. Our Justin Brake is there.
Hey, insulting me. Hey, you guys have you are packing up right now. Ceremony.
On Saturday, the RCMP arrested land protector Cannahus Manuel while evicting the Warriors from North Thompson River Provincial Park. Manuel was released from custody the same day, and the group has since established themselves in Blue River, BC, next to the site of a planned Trans Mountain accommodations complex expected to house hundreds of workers. The Tiny House Warriors say they're determined to stop the pipeline and take back their land.
And when we're saying that the Canadian government and Trudeau government did not get the free, prior informed consent of the Secwepemc people collectively, it's important for us to continue to say that this is a collective right. It's a collective right within all 10,000 Secwepemc that are within the Secwepemc Nation.
Two from Canyon Creek, Alberta, said the camps established to house workers can lead to increased violence against women.
Being an Indigenous woman myself, I thoroughly understand the amount of women that are murdered and missing in this country and the reasons for it. Like, I've worked in the oil field myself.
A 2016 report from Amnesty International says resource development in BC is both fueling violence and increasing vulnerability to violence.
There's a lot of people that are fearful to speak out against the camps. Some of these victims are the workers, are the female workers inside the camps. And if they come out and they address it, then they're blacklisted from any type of jobs working at those camps anymore.
Manuel and the Tiny House Warriors are calling land protectors to join them in Secwepemc. She said she's not afraid of being arrested again.
Well, they didn't win, because we're here and I'm standing on this ground that they forcibly removed my people from all those hundreds of years, and I'm still standing here. And this is the power that nobody sees. Has done to us.
She says fighting Canada on the Trans Mountain Pipeline and strengthening the fight for Secwepemc sovereignty are necessary.
And all of this that the Canadian government has done to us to forcibly displace us off of our traditional territory onto Indian reserves, which is 0.2% of our land base. And so this is freedom. This is leaving the reservation. This is revolutionary. This is resistance.
Justin Brake, APTN National News, unceded Secwepemc territory.
We have to go to a commercial break.
Coming up, we bring you the story of one First Nation in BC who is challenging the RCMP's decision to shut down a pot shop.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, and I'm standing here at the Great Northern Arts Festival here in Inuvik. This week, I'll bring you stories of the festival, along with other stories from the Beaufort Delta region. From culture and tradition, it's a celebration of everything art. Stay tuned for these stories.
Here's a look at Thursday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. Sunny skies and 25 in Fredericton, cloudy and 24 in Halifax, 23 for Happy Valley Goose Bay, 12 in Nain. A sunny day in Montreal with a high of 27. The sun continues in Val-d'Or with a high of 28. Warm days in southern Ontario, 28 in London, Toronto, and North Bay. Cloudy and 27 degrees in Thunder Bay and Sioux Lookout. In northern Manitoba, 10 in Churchill, 27 in the Pas. Clouds and 25 in Barons River, Winnipeg, and Brandon. Over to Saskatchewan, 27 above in Estevan and Regina. 25 on Thursday in Meadow Lake. A little sun and 23 in Stony Rapids.
An Indigenous-led act of civil disobedience in Montreal is shining a light on what they call excessive ticketing by police. Tuesday, they occupied a piece of sidewalk where Indigenous homeless people have been receiving fines. Tom Fenario has this story.
1, 2, 3, hey!
Debai is a Cree outreach worker who works in Montreal's disproportionately large Indigenous homeless population. He organized this action after a rash of tickets were recently given out on this corner.
The fact is that where are these people to go? People want to just brush them away until they're out of sight and out of mind. But in reality, that's never going to happen. This has always been an area where people have congregated.
The demonstration took place across the street from Montreal's Cabot Square, a public place that the city's homeless and vulnerable Indigenous population have been frequenting for decades.
We had complaints from more than one merchant and also from some citizens and different complaints, which was consumption of alcohol, also obstructing the sidewalk, pedestrian, and also littering a public domain.
For 10 years, Officer Adabel Pimentel has patrolled this area. He says in his experience, officers use their discretion when handing out tickets and that usually it's a last resort.
There is a lot of warnings most of the time. There's a lot of mediation done trying to find solutions, but yes, it could end up in a municipal bylaw infraction.
These cops never stop. I got a ticket one time for sleeping.
24-year-old Osiris Jackson is at the Open Door Shelter, located 1 block south of Cabot Square. Jackson showed APTN News 2 tickets for drinking in public, each for $149. He has an upcoming court date for unpaid fines.
So I would say max in total I owe the government is over $1,000 of tickets.
David Chapman is the director of the Open Door Shelter, where he estimates almost half of his clientele are Inuit. Because the Open Door is used as a mailing address for a lot of clients, the shelter gets many unpaid tickets for them in the mail. He says the tickets in this box are from the last 2.5 months.
What are these tickets for? Having an open can of alcohol, smoking too close to a bus shelter, jaywalking, sleeping on a bench in the metro. Relatively minor and arguably unnecessary infractions.
Chapman says that according to his clients, there are often no warnings given by police, and that one client has over $20,000 in fines.
What happens is, knowing that you have thousands of dollars to repay, and you don't actually have the ability to repay it, it actually creates a psychological dysfunction that drives you back to the addiction of choice.
Meanwhile, people at the sit-in emphasize that the rapidly gentrifying area needs to accept the people who are here before them.
There's a deeper social issues at hand. There's more to the money behind the development of this area. Maybe at that level, they could be more considerate of actual people.
Tom Finario, APTN National News, Montreal.
The legalization of cannabis may be just 3 months away in Canada, but First Nations in Chilliwack, BC aren't waiting. In fact, they want to provide high-quality cannabis that originates from First Nations businesses, and they want to be part of the new cannabis industry. But it turns out the RCMP think differently. Amber Bernard reports.
Yay, Indigenous Bloom opened its doors to customers at the beginning of July. The cannabis dispensary is owned and operated by the Kwakwaka'wakw First Nation, and they think growing and selling cannabis is a good business to get into for its community.
People are really benefiting from, the health benefits of cannabis, but also benefiting from Kwakwaka'wakw having a professionally run facility like this that can offer those products.
But on July 12th, it was raided by the Chilliwack RCMP detachment. The band believes the RCMP acted outside of their jurisdiction, and they want them to respect the band's own laws on their own land.
They weren't aware, I think, that Kwakwaka'wakw had a cannabis law that governs cannabis production and distribution on their reserve lands. So yeah, they came and paid us a bit of an unfriendly visit, but hopefully we're working through it.
However, the RCMP say otherwise, and that the rule of law applies everywhere in Canada.
Controlled Drug and Substance Act is a federal statute. It's a federal statute. It's the law in Canada.
The day after the store was raided, Indigenous Bloom reopened its doors, and the band sent a letter to the RCMP asking them to respect the reserve's cannabis law. The RCMP has yet to respond to the letter, but so far they have let the store stay open, and Councillor Sandra Joe remains hopeful.
We feel pretty good about moving forward. A lot of this was due to like we're trying to help people with illnesses and stuff like that.
Kwakwaka'wakw feel they have a strong argument about enforcing their own laws on reserve, which just so happens to have land code. Land code gives First Nation communities the freedom to create laws that regulate the land on which they own, but there is a gray area when it comes to cannabis.
Many First Nations have land code and develop laws that govern their land, so we don't think they have the jurisdiction, and it was the right move.
Kwakwaka'wakw says they are in the cannabis industry to help create new business opportunities and employment for its community, and plan to do just that as they anticipate October 17th. Amber Bernard, APTN National News, Kwakwaka'wakw First Nation.
We have to take another break, but when we come back, we'll take you to the Great Northern Arts Festival in Inuvik.
First, here's the rest of your weather for Thursday. Here's the rest of Thursday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. Cloudy skies and 20 in High Level and Peace River. The clouds continue in southern Alberta, 21 in Calgary, 28 in Medicine Hat. A scorcher for parts of BC, 30 in Kamloops, 31 in Penticton. Cooler in northern BC, 17 in Prince Rupert and Smithers. In Yukon, partly sunny and 21 in Whitehorse, 17 in Old Crow. Over to NWT, 24 above in Trout Lake, Fort Liard, Wati, and Norman Wells. Overcast and 20 in Colville Lake. Temperatures drop to 6 degrees in Saxe Harbor. In Nunavut, cooler temperatures, 13 in Chesterfield, 11 in Cambridge Bay. Just a high of 3 in Resolute on Thursday, 9 in Clyde River. Welcome back. For the small Gwich'in and Inuvialuit community of Inuvik, the Great Northern Arts Festival is a big crowd pleaser. But for the Northern artists who get to share their techniques and take part in community workshops, it's an even bigger deal. APTN's Charlotte Jacobs is at the Arts Festival and brings us this.
This room might be quiet, but in fact, more than 24 artists are hard at work. Blair Thornson and Daryl Taylor have just met, but tonight they will share the smell of burnt wood and learning a new skill, because they are taking part in a laser engraving workshop.
Well, that's pretty unique.
Daryl Taylor is a carver from Tuktoyaktuk.
I was wondering about the little plastic images that were sitting on a table there, and I was watching it being made, and I figured I was wondering whether I could do that with carvings also.
Both artists are learning about laser engraving through a free workshop offered by the local college, and they're getting inspired by what they're learning. For Thornton, who paints regional pictures onto local maps, he has run into copyright issues and cannot mass produce his work. But this workshop might change that.
Someone had suggested, why don't you paint your own map or make your own map, and then I could reproduce that and I could paint on it, and then I could have a reproduction.
Over in the craft section, Vanessa Airdaughter of Whitehorse attends her first festival. She sits beside Catherine Cockney, who is already on her second workshop.
We create friendships, and we also learn other skills too by working with other artists, and that's very valuable.
On display is Airdaughter's weaved work, but she also dabbles in raven feather art. As a non-Indigenous artist learning from Indigenous makers, she's been told that the line between appropriation and appreciation is in tension.
I always am very, very clear, especially when I'm weaving publicly or around with other weavers and stuff. I'll always state really clearly that I am acutely aware of the fact that I am not Indigenous, and this is not my knowledge. I'm like a guest in that community.
Daryl, Blair, Vanessa, and Catherine will each go home with a completed piece of art from the workshop.
We passed.
But the friendships they've made and the inspiration from learning to create will last a lifetime. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Inuvik.
A giant iceberg that drifted dangerously close to a village in Greenland is so big that it's been spotted from space. The European Space Agency has released this image. Dozens of people were evacuated last week when the 11-ton iceberg kept creeping closer. There was a concern it would break apart and send large waves over low-lying areas. The latest reports say wind conditions have changed and pushed the iceberg away from the village's harbor. That's all the news we have for you on this Wednesday, July 18th, the day the ladies took over. I'm Melissa Ridgen. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
And I'm Brittany Hobson. We leave you with these Aztec dancers from the Masters game in Toronto. Have a great evening.